Good evening, dear friends. And it's wonderful being back, right? We lost 2 weeks just now. And we've been learning chapter 29. Chapter 29 is a very rough chapter. It's not an easy chapter to study. It's very heavy. It's a heavy topic. Chapter 29 introduced to us the importance of not having an overinflated animal soul. We all have an animal soul, and we're not going to get rid of it, but we also don't want it to get out of hand. So we've got an animal, we got to keep it tamed. Got to keep that animal on a leash. And it's a beast, it's a bull. It has to be controlled. And there's a very big risk, a danger, if the animal soul gets out of control. Now, what's out of control for the animal soul? If its arrogance is fed too much. If the ego of the animal soul is fed too much. Because ego is the currency of the animal soul. The ego and the arrogance, even the word chutzpah, literally chutzpah, it loves being full of itself. It loves being complacent. It loves feeling like life is good. It loves feeling smug about itself, even spiritually complacent, spiritually smug. The animal soul likes feeling good about itself. It could also feel good, oh, I'm such a good Jew. I learned so much Torah, look at me. He's so proud of himself, so full of himself. Whenever the animal soul gets that level of dominance, of arrogance, you run the risk of the condition that we are speaking about in this chapter, which is what we call a fossilized heart. When you become spiritually apathetic, spiritually numb, spiritually unmoved, which is very scary. The godly soul literally can't function. The divine soul is trying to exert its energy, trying to send some pings, and nothing doing. It's a very, very dangerous condition to be going through. And it comes from the animal soul getting too much dominance. And the Alter said, okay, we need to restore health over here. We need to restore the healthy equilibrium, the healthy balance. We can't have an animal soul that is so out of whack, that has so much control and dominance, and it's allowing its ego and its arrogance to be overshadowing and eclipsing the energy of the divine soul. We can't let that happen. We need to break down the animal soul. We need to bring it back to a healthy point. And again, what is the strength of the animal soul? The ego. The sense of ego is the strength, is the currency, is the potency of the animal soul. And therefore, the Alter says, as uncomfortable as it is, when we face such a condition, we have to break the ego. We have to break that complacency. We have to break that smugness. And we have to inspire within ourselves a desire and a yearning and a brokenness to grow higher and to realize that no, it's not good enough where I am right now. So the Alter said that if you're facing this condition where you have an animal soul that has become, that has gone wild, it's off the leash, you can't control it, and therefore the animal soul becomes, it starts hijacking your human condition. It hijacks the human. It hijacks the human control panel. We need to break it. We need to break it down. And the Alter gave us a few meditations to help inspire within ourselves a little sense of brokenness, a sense of humility, and a sense of yearning to grow higher. Okay. It wasn't comfortable to learn. And I'm sure it's even less comfortable to actually implement, no? To go through not a soul crushing, but an ego crushing, to go through an ego crushing experience on that level is definitely not a comfortable thing to do. And, but if you need to, you need to, right? Here, what we're going to do today is like this. We have one last little strategy to learn from the Alter Rebbe. How to break the animal soul, how to break it back down, how to bring it back down, how to break the arrogance, the stranglehold of the arrogance of the animal soul. And then we're going to learn part 3 of the chapter, which is such a beautiful ending. For a difficult chapter, the ending is beautiful, literally beautiful. And it helps give proper perspective for this whole conversation. So I'm very excited to learn with you the end of this chapter. So let us begin on page 220 in your handouts, which is one last strategy, an additional strategy of how to bring down the animal soul from that place of arrogance and strength and height and make it recede to lessen its stranglehold within you. A very interesting type of technique. Page 220, an additional strategy. Says the Alter Rebbe, here's another technique that you can use. Here's something else you could do. This is very interesting. Listen carefully. Rouse your divine soul into a storm of anger to berate and belittle the animal soul. Get that divine soul mad and get it to belittle and berate the animal soul. That's what our sages taught us. A person should always enrage his Yetzer Tov against his Yetzer Hara, as the verse instructs, be angry and do not sin. Okay, be angry. So this is a whole different technique. Until now, we were talking about different forms of meditation, that these meditations, when you think about them enough, will get you a little bit broken. Now, says the Alter Rebbe, no. Now we're going to use a technique called anger. Now, usually you would think that anger is a bad thing, right? Getting angry, is that a good thing? Well, the real truth is, it's like every human temperament. It's like every human emotion. It could be good. It could be bad. It all depends how you use it. If it's love is good, but if it's misplaced love, it's no good. Kindness is good, but misplaced kindness, misguided kindness could be very dangerous. Is anger good or bad? Well, it all depends how you use it. There's unhealthy anger, but there's also healthy anger. Healthy anger is when we could arouse a certain indignation, righteous indignation, from our godly soul towards our animal soul. And our sages tell us that if you enrage your Yetzer Tov, your good inclination, against your evil inclination, that will help you to not sin. What should you do? What does that mean that you should enrage the Yetzer Tov? Says the Alter Rebbe like this. What they meant is to rage against your animal soul, which is the Yetzer Hara, right? Just get mad at your animal soul, which contains the Yetzer Hara, with a furious and angered voice in your thoughts. Which just means don't scream it with your voice. Scream within your mind. Mentally address your animal soul. Say to it, this is what you say to it. You are a truly evil, wicked, disgusting, despicable, slimy creature. Using all the names that our sages have called the Yetzer Hara. Which means our sages, if you look up the Talmud, uses all of these descriptions to refer to the Yetzer Hara. And get yourself worked up about this. Get yourself mad. Get yourself mad at your animal soul. You're evil, you're wicked, you're disgusting, despicable. What are you doing to me? And this is what you should say. This is why you're getting yourself mad. Here's the script. You ready? Very interesting script over here. You should scream and get yourself upset at your animal soul, saying like this. How dare you continue to eclipse the infinite light of God? How much longer are you going to do this to me? I'm a Jew, there's a God, and all of a sudden you're coming and trying to place a wedge between me and God. You're trying to make me forget about God. Get yourself mad about this. Let's continue. He pervades all worlds, always was here, is here now, and will always be here equally. He is the only true reality, even in this space where I stand now, just as there was nothing other than God before the world was created. Which means, I'm real, but I'm not real compared to God's realness. God is really real. He is the true reality. To him, there is no change whatsoever. Like it says, I am God, I have not changed, for he is beyond time. So which means God is so real. God is present. And then comes along the animal soul and makes you forget about this God. Makes you forget about the truth of reality. So that's where we continue. Yet you despicable thing, etc. You deny this self-evident truth. That everything is like absolutely nothing relative to him. This is so clear. It's like you can visibly see it. Yet you deny it. What's going on over here? He's saying, I don't understand what's going on over here. I'm a Jew. I have a soul. I've got a God in my life. God is the only real thing that matters in this world. And here comes along you animal soul, and you're trying to make me forget about it. Enough already, right? Stop annoying me. Stop being a prick to me. And our sages say that sometimes this is a good technique. When you do this, it actually is effective, that the animal soul backs off. Speak a little bit harshly to it. So it doesn't mean that you scream at yourself with your mouth, but it means mentally get yourself worked up. And, address your animal soul with this, in this way. And the author says, when you do this, something amazing happens. Let's continue. Page 221. Doing this will actually assist the divine soul. It will illuminate its eyes to see the oneness of God's infinite light with the clarity of real vision, and no longer as just second-hand knowledge or an abstract understanding. When you get your animal soul to back off, not only are you getting rid of the problem, but you're helping yourself. You're helping the divine soul. You're helping the divine soul in the sense that until now, how did it see God? How did it relate to God? Only as second-hand knowledge. But now it will be able to relate to God with a clarity of real vision. So this is an interesting concept in Chassidus. That there's a difference between hearing something, there's a difference between understanding something, and there's a difference between seeing something. And the Alter Rebbe says that when you go through this difficulty and you are able to break the arrogance of the animal soul, you give yourself the gift of relating to God on a whole new level. You gain a deeper appreciation of the way you relate to God. And what the Alter Rebbe is saying is like this. It's a little bit of a deep concept, so follow along with me. What's the difference between hearing something and seeing something? When you hear something, and even if you understand it well, it's always going to be somewhat removed from you. I heard this, I understand it. It's like a theory. Okay, it's an idea. Seeing something automatically has a much deeper impact on you. I'll give you an example. Imagine you are a professor, and your field of expertise is, let's say, Niagara Falls. All right? But it happens to be that you live in China. You've never been to the falls, to Niagara Falls. But you know everything about Niagara Falls more than anybody else knows. You know exactly how many gallons fall per second. You know exactly at what speed and with how much pressure. You know where the water's coming from the Great Lakes, and it goes to Lake Erie. You know it all. But you've never been there. And let's say you've even seen pictures of it. So you know a lot. You understand a lot. You've heard a lot. And no one in the world knows more about Niagara Falls than you. You are the world's greatest professional about Niagara Falls. So you heard a lot about it. That professor, and he finally gets the ability to see the falls in person, the subject of all of his years and years of study. He goes to Niagara Falls. Is that experience going to have any impact on him? Is he going to be like, oh yeah, I know about this. I've read so much about the falls. I don't know, now I see it. Yeah. Or is it going to be a meaningful experience? Is it going to be an impactful experience? I think we'd all agree that no matter how much you know about something, when you see it, it has a very deep impact on you. Not because you've learned anything new. By seeing the falls, the professor is not learning anything new. He's not gaining any new knowledge, but he's gaining what we call clarity. All of a sudden, when you witness it, everything that you've understood starts, it touches deeper into the soul. Just to give you a different example, not to compare the two, one's just a light example, one's a heavy example, but going to see Auschwitz, going to see the camps, to see the camps in person, no matter how much you know about the Holocaust, no matter how much you've heard, no matter how much you've read, but you're there, it hits you. I was never there, but I can only imagine. Even if you've seen pictures, but you being there, seeing is a whole different experience. Now, mentally, there's also something called hearing, and there's something called seeing. And we don't mean seeing with the physical eyes. Kabbalah speaks about the eye of the mind and the eye of the heart. Sometimes you could learn something. You could learn like a piece of Torah. Maybe you're learning Tanya. And you learn it. And you understand it. You're like, all right, I understand it. It's nice. I get it. Sometimes you learn something and it will just click in your heart and soul. And it will click in your brain. It'll be like, oh, I get it. I feel it. I'm like, it touches you on a deeper level. It's not understanding. Understanding is like hearing. Okay, I heard about it. I get it. But then sometimes there's a certain clarity which it all of a sudden hits you. It's beyond understanding. It's when your soul actually gets to see what you're hearing. Not seeing it visually, but with a clarity of vision. And that's a gift. When we learn Torah and all of a sudden something clicks with our soul, that's a gift. It's the gift that our soul is able to experience a piece of godly wisdom, not just on the level of hearing, of understanding, of secondhand knowledge, but with the clarity of vision. The idea, the Alter Rebbe says that over here, when we go through a difficult period with our animal soul, and we need to fight back, and we need to try to bring down the animal soul, and break the ego of the animal soul to try to regain spiritual health, says the Alter Rebbe, you come out with a net gain. You come out with net profit. Sometimes when you deal with problems, at best there's no damage done. Sometimes you deal with problems and you're actually at a disadvantage, right? You're at a loss. You're not at a profit. Sometimes dealing with problems hurts things. The Alter Rebbe says over here, no, when you deal with this problem, with this spiritual desensitization, spiritual apathy, spiritual numbness, the fossilized heart, when you treat it, the divine soul comes out on top. That what? Now it relates to God on a deeper level. It's with the level of vision, which is a lot deeper. And the Alter Rebbe says, the Alter Rebbe concludes, and as explained elsewhere, it is this shift from understanding to clear vision that underlies all spiritual toil. This is spiritual work. Spiritual work is to try to relate to God, not just as an abstraction, but to relate to God as something real. To have it touch you on the level of vision. And that's, of course, easier said than done, right? It's easy to learn about God. But as a concept, as a theory, as an abstraction. Spiritual development of a Jew means to relate to God on a deeper level. That God starts becoming a real thing in your life, not just an abstraction. And that you feel it. You feel it in your heart and soul. That's vision. Vision makes you feel. When you read a book, okay, either you do feel or you don't feel, but it's always going to be an abstract concept. When you experience something, it becomes very real. Like Dr. Joel wrote, a picture's worth 1,000 words, right? And it's even more than that. It's a lot more than 1,000 words. 1,000 words can't describe, but that's even a picture. I'm talking about eyewitness, seeing it yourself. Seeing is believing, right? There's nothing that compares to seeing. At this point, we kind of came to the conclusion of the chapter. The Alter Rebbe introduced to us a problem called spiritual apathy, called a fossilized heart. The Alter Rebbe gave us the diagnosis of the problem and the treatment of the problem. And what the Alter Rebbe believes that this is a pretty easy problem to treat. Some conditions are very difficult to treat. The Alter Rebbe says this is a condition easy to treat. You identify the problem. You are suffering from a fossilized heart. It is happening because your animal soul has overpowered within you over the godly soul because of its arrogance. And you need to break the arrogance. So either meditate or scream at it, mentally scream at it. And the Alter Rebbe says, as soon as you do that, the problem will go away. Your divine soul will work again. Not only is it going to work again, it's going to have the advantage of vision. And the Alter Rebbe concludes this chapter with explaining to us why it works. And most importantly, how does it happen so easily? The Alter Rebbe is very confident over here, very optimistic. This is an easy problem to treat. The problem's going to go away. A little bit of belittling the animal soul, and you're right back again on your feet. Who said? Why is the Alter Rebbe so confident that this problem will go away so easily? Seems like a very big problem. Your animal soul has built up so much arrogance to the point that it could literally totally block out. It could jam the signal of the divine soul. And the author was saying, a little bit of work, and your divine soul is going to be working again just fine. Why does it work? How does it work so easily? And the Alter Rebbe gives us the answer, and this is such a beautiful piece of Tanya. And this piece of Tanya is one of the most important parts of Tanya that give us perspective over ourselves. How do we view ourselves as Jews? So, dear friends, page 221. Okay. Page 221, part 3. The truth of the Jew emerges. This is beautiful. Let's read. How is it, says the Alter Rebbe, how is it that by belittling the Sitra Achra so much is so rapidly achieved? How could this be? You belittle the Sitra Achra and all of a sudden getting all these great results again? So the Alter Rebbe says, because that's a spelling mistake. Because in reality, there is no substance at all to the Sitra Achra. The Alter Rebbe says you're dealing with an enemy, with a threat that is just a facade. The Sitra Achra seems like a problem. It's not a real problem. You want to know why? It's all hot air. There's no real substance. And therefore, what the Alter Rebbe is going to tell us is that the moment you could break through the facade, you actually discover nothing was here all along. It wasn't actually that big of a problem. Let's read. The Alter is going to explain that to us. That is why the Sitra Achra is compared to darkness. So we all have Sitra Achra, which is the negative energy within creation, and we have negative energy inside our own souls, inside our own animal souls. Says the Alter Rebbe, the Sitra Achra, the power of darkness, the power of unholiness, is like darkness, which has no substance at all, and is therefore effortlessly displaced as soon as there is light. Okay, so we can observe this, a very interesting thing. Usually in nature, if you want to displace something, there's a process, there's a tension. So for example, if my house is hot, I didn't have the AC running a whole day, and I come home and it's very hot outside and it's very sunny outside, and the house is literally 90 degrees. So what do? I have to put on the air conditioner. I put on the central AC. How long is it going to take for the house to cool off? Right? It doesn't take 60 seconds. It doesn't even take 10 minutes. It takes a while. There's a process here. It's not simple. There's a lot of science. There's pressure. There's this. There's that. We're trying to displace one form of air, and we move hot air, put a new air. Yeah, it's a big process. It's very, very interesting. Very interesting. When it comes to darkness, you can have a dark room, very deeply dark room. You put on a light, and the light effortlessly and instantaneously does its thing, and the darkness just disappears. And you wonder, how's that happening? And the answer is because darkness is not a thing. Darkness is the lack of a thing. Is darkness an existence? It is an existence, but it's not its own existence. It's an existence that it only appears when another existence, which is a real thing, is absent. And that's the nature of darkness. It's the one thing in our universe which is threatening and scary and confusing and disorienting, but it takes nothing to just push it away. And the Alter Rebbe says that is the nature. We have to think about it this way. Sitra Achra is spiritual darkness. It is a force of darkness, of confusion, of loneliness, of unclarity, of doubts. And it's real. Darkness is real. No one's saying it's not real. It's real. It's scary. But it's not really anything of substance. Let's read. So too, says the Alter Rebbe, the Sitra Achra. So too the Sitra Achra. Although it has tremendous energy, We do see Sitra Achra is a very, very important force, a spiritual force within our universe. Enough to vitalize all the non-kosher animals and all the nations of the world, as well as the animal soul of the Jew. You have to think about this. Every single non-kosher animal is powered by Sitra Achra. All the nations of the world are powered by Sitra Achra. Even the Jew, the animal soul of the Jew, is powered by Sitra Achra. So this is a very, very powerful force in nature. But says the Alter, but nevertheless, none of this energy is its own, heaven forbid. It's not a thing, but it doesn't have any real substance. It's very powerful, but it doesn't have any of its own energy. Rather, its power is derived from the power of holiness, as we learned above. Its whole existence is dependent on holiness. And to fully explain this is beyond the scope of this class right now. But just like darkness feeds off of the lack of light, so too, conceptually speaking, the presence and the power of Sitra Achra, it's not its own power. It feeds off of the energy and the existence of holiness. But really, the darkness, the Sitra Achra, doesn't have any of its own real substance. It doesn't have any of its own power. So therefore, says the Alter Rebbe, so therefore, it is thoroughly nullified in the presence of holiness. Well, as soon as you introduce holiness, the darkness goes away. The Sitra Achra goes away. Just as darkness is annihilated by physical light. So how to get rid of darkness? The previous Rebbe had a line: you can't fight darkness with a stick. You have to add light. If you're going to fight darkness with a stick, you're going to get nowhere. Just add light. You'll see the whole battle just disappears. Okay, 1 second. This sounds very good in theory. What happens inside of us? Does our animal soul melt away and disappear the second that we do a mitzvah? The second that we introduce the light of our godly soul? The second that we introduce light of holiness? No. Our animal soul is very healthy. It's not intimidated by light. It's still a threat. And that's what we've been describing here in this chapter. That we try getting the godly soul to add light, but it's nothing doing. The animal soul is somehow successfully eclipsing the light. The darkness is eclipsing the light. How does that work? That's not supposed to be happening. Says the Alter Rebbe, here's the catch. It is just that God has granted special permission to the Sitra Achra of the animal soul to have the ability to exert itself against the divine soul within a human being, enabling it to overwhelm that holiness. Sitra Achra and your animal soul in truth does not have any power to fight against the godly soul. But God artificially creates the situation that the animal soul does have temporarily the ability to be a threatening force against the divine soul. So naturally, it can't fight against the godly soul. Naturally, darkness can't win against light. It just disappears. But within a human being, God gave special temporary permission, like you're kind of bending the laws of nature, that the animal soul does have the power to be a threat against the godly soul. Why does God do that? Why does God allow this unnatural thing to happen within us? There's a very unnatural dynamics happening over here. The animal soul somehow, even though it shouldn't have any power, but it does have power. Says the Alter, but why does God do that? But the intent is only so that the person will be aroused to fight back, to knock the Sitra Achra back down. God only does that to inspire the Jew to fight the good fight. God only makes our animal soul to be such a real threat and a real powerful threat. Only it's like that the Jew is going to muster up all of his energy and try to knock it down. How does he knock it down? And he does that, we're on page 222. And he does that by knocking himself down, by his own ego crushing and self-effacement. There you go. How do we knock down our animal soul? You have to go through your own ego crushing. You have to break your own arrogance. You have to feel that humility. That's what God wants. God wants to inspire a Jew to find the energy within himself to fight, to stand up against the force of evil within himself, within the force of Sitra Achra within himself. And as soon as you do that, let's continue reading. And if you do this, God will help you. Why? Since with an awakening from below, there is an awakening from above. When you do something down here in your own world, God responds from above with the exact same action. And God will fulfill his promise about the Sitra Achra. From there I will bring you down, says God. God is going to bring down the Sitra Achra from its place of power because of your action to try to knock it down. Meaning, says the Alter Rebbe, meaning that he, God, will strip the Sitra Achra of its dominion and potency, withdrawing the power and the authority he gave it to overwhelm the holy light of the divine soul. When you fight back, God is going to also respond and simply remove this artificial power that was given to the Sitra Achra. And what happens as soon as the Sitra Achra loses the power that God has given it? Says the Alter, but then, once stripped of this power, it will be automatically eliminated and pushed aside, just like the darkness is annulled before physical light. So the Alter says you have to realize, it's all a lie. It's all a bluff. It looks like there's a big force called the animal soul. It looks like there's a threatening force called Sitra Achra. And it looks like that force is a real threat against your soul, against your godly soul. The Alter says no. In truth, this is not a real threat. What you are seeing right now is a facade. It's an empty shell. It's an empty shell. It looks like this is a big deal. There's nothing doing here. All you got to do is pop that balloon and you'll see the whole thing disappears. Just call out its bluff. Knock it down a little bit and you'll see what looked like this massive thing is actually so easy. It's nothing. You know, it's like they make movie sets and they can make a big castle for a movie set. Did they have to build this massive castle? The whole thing's made out of styrofoam. So when you look at it on the big screen, it looks like something big. But the moment you actually address it and face it and fight the fight, it's a facade. There's nothing real here. The Alter says that's what happens. God creates this illusion that we have an animal soul, and we do have to fight back because it's very threatening. But the moment that we actually start interacting with it and we start trying to knock it down, we realize this is actually very easy. God removes this facade and it just disappears. It disappears into nothingness. And health, spiritual health, and the power of our neshama, of our divine soul, returns. Now, to bring out this idea a little bit more, the Alter is going to show us how this entire description and this entire dynamic plays out in a story in the Torah. You know, the Torah has a lot of stories. Most people look at the Bible as a storybook. Meaning there's also a lot of other stuff there. There's laws, but it's a storybook. Story of the history of the people of Israel. And that's wrong. Especially when you see the Torah from the lenses of Chassidus, from the inner dimension of Torah. There's no just stories. It's not just history. It's not trivial stories. Every single story is conveying a spiritual truth that teaches the Jew the truths of life and teaches the Jew how to navigate life. It's a story that contains a deep message. The story is expressing a deep message. It's not just a story. It's not just history. It's expressing a truth. So let's take a story that seems just like history, and you'll see that really it's a spiritual story. There's a spiritual dynamic. There's a spiritual storyline. Let's speak about the story of the spies. Let's give some background. The Jews leave Egypt. The Jews get the Torah on Mount Sinai that we're about to celebrate very soon. And by the way, I want to make mention, we just sent out an email today. Next Wednesday is the holiday of Shavuot, and it is extremely important for every single Jew to hear the Ten Commandments being read from the Torah scroll, because our souls were there, and this is like our annual anniversary with God, and we reread the vows, if you want to put it that way, And it's absolutely critical for every single Jew, man, woman, and child to hear the reading of the Ten Commandments and to reconnect with that place, the initial place where our nation was born and when each of our souls entered into a relationship with God. So I want to encourage you, and it's going to be a lot of fun, a lot of good food as part of the holiday tradition. Next Wednesday, 5:30 p.m., make sure to come on over. We're going to have a large outdoor event, and I'm looking forward to having all of you there. So we sent out the email today. Please RSVP and bring everybody along. All right. That was a little commercial break. Back to the plot. And the Jews are right away brought to the edge of the land of Israel, the land of Canaan, as it was called then. And Moses asked God that before we go to conquer the land of Canaan, is it okay if we send a group of spies? And the group of spies will scout out the land and come up with a good strategy, and maybe it'll just help the Jews, it'll ease their nerves. It'll make the Jews feel that we have a good plan. It's a strategy. We're not walking in with our eyes closed. We know what we're going to face. Moses asks God permission to do that, and God says, sure, Moses, if you want to do that, you could do it. So Moses chooses 12 of the most qualified people of Israel, leaders of each tribe, great men, strong personalities, spiritually. And Moses gives them the mission. Go to the land of Israel, come up with a plan, how we're going to enter the land of Israel, what's going to be the strategy of conquest. And, help all the Jews feel that we're going to, that this is going to work out well. It's like that we're not going to have any Jews with anxiety, that we're going to, They go. The spies are there in the land of Israel for 40 days, and they come back and they say, we're not doing it. Which is interesting. Moses didn't send them to the land of Israel to check if we could conquer it. They were only sent to go and find out how. But they came back and they weren't true to their mission. They said, we're not doing it. And the people of Israel cried and they became hysterical. And they started screaming at Moses, take us back to Egypt. We don't want to die on the battlefield. We're all going to be destroyed. It was horrible. Okay. What happened was God became very upset. I promised you a promised land. I've done everything for you, taking you out of Egypt. I give you manna every single day. I'm saying these people witness God every single day. And here you guys are losing faith so quickly. And Moses told the Jews, God is very upset, and God has decreed that this generation is not entering the land of Israel. You don't want to go? Don't go. All of you will die in this desert. We're going to wander for 40 years. In 40 years, when all the adult males of this generation will die, then we'll go into the land of Israel. But not you. That's the story. The Alter is going to tell us there's a lot of deep spiritual message in this story. Let's read. You ready? Page 222. An unbelievable idea. The story of the spies, says the Alter Rebbe. In fact, we find this explicitly in the Torah, in the story of the spies sent to scout the land of Canaan. When the spies returned from their mission, they reported, we are unable to go up against this people, for they are stronger than us. The mighty nations, mighty kings, giants of men were there in the land of Canaan. They said, we can't go. They're just stronger than us. And our sages say, which in Hebrew can also be read as they are stronger than him. They weren't only saying that the nations in Canaan are stronger than us. They were saying they're stronger than him, stronger than God. In other words, they questioned God's omnipotence. Ooh. They said, God is very strong, but not this strong. This is what these spies said. Which, by the way, is quite crazy. Let's just pause here for a second. God literally just took you out of Egypt, the very superpower of human civilization. No even single slave was ever managed to escape from the land of Egypt, and God took out an entire nation. Egypt, just yesterday, I was listening in the car to a talk from the Rebbe, and the Rebbe was describing how the land of Egypt was the superpower of its day, not only in brute strength, but in, as they say in Yiddish, and German, the Wissenschaft, like science and knowledge. They were in philosophy. They were so advanced. The Rebbe said, till today, we struggle to understand what they knew about engineering. We still don't fully understand how they pulled off their engineering feats, which is an unbelievable thing. We're talking about a civilization around thousands of years ago, and we still struggle today with all the advances that we have. We still don't understand how, just how advanced they were. An unbelievably advanced civilization. God took the Jews out from there, crosses seas, 10 plagues that totally destroys the land of Egypt. Practically and morally destroys them. God gives a Torah on Mount Sinai. They're getting manna every single day. Like, what more should God do to impress his people? And what do they say? No, these land of Canaan is too much for God. It didn't even make any sense. But this is what they said. They came back and they said, and they really felt this way. They're like, it's just not going to work. God is very strong, but not this strong. They were facing 31 mighty kings, 31 armies. By the way, I get why they were intimidated. Can you imagine fighting against 31 armies, 31 fronts at one time? In the 6-Day War, right? Israel had 4 fronts, right? Am I mistaken? Was it 4? I think it was 4 fronts there, right? Can you imagine 31 fronts at once? So I understand why the Jews were intimidated. But the spies came back and they said, it's not happening. They're stronger than him. They're stronger than God. But the Alter Rebbe observes in the story, let's continue reading. Yet immediately afterwards, the same people who were hysterical over that report retracted and said, here we are, ready to go up to the place that God said. Something happens in the story. All of a sudden, all of these people who were literally crying hysterically and begging Moses, bring us back to Egypt, let us at least be slaves, at least we'll live, at least they'll give us bread to eat. Something happens in the story that all of a sudden they say, no, let's go. They're eager. They're excited. Every single good drama, every single good story, something fundamental has to shift. There has to be point A to point B. That's a good story, right? At the beginning of the story, we have to establish that there's something happening. There's a problem. There's a tension. And then somehow there's a resolution. Things change. It goes to point B. And usually what happens in good storytelling, to get from point A to point B, there has to be a disturbance. Something has to shake up what's happening. The author is saying, I see a point A to point B. First, all the Jews are saying, no, they're crying, they're hysterical, they're saying, it's not going to work, too much for God, even God can't win this war. And then all of a sudden, point B, they are totally excited. They're saying, Hinenu, we're ready, let's go, let's fight. And if you look at the story, what actually happens is Moses says, no, God already decided you're not going. And the Jews went on their own initiative to try to conquer the land of Israel, and they did lose the war. It was very, very bloody. It wasn't a good scene at all. Because Moses said, God said no. But something happened here. The Jews at first are literally saying, no, let's drop the plan. And then something happens. What happened? What happened? They got the Jews to all of a sudden get all excited, saying, let's go up, let's fight, let's go to the land of Canaan. The author says, like this. So where did this sudden faith in God's power come from? All of a sudden the Jews have a change of heart. All of a sudden, first they say, no, God can't do this. Then all of a sudden the Jews are saying, yeah, let's do it. What was the disturbance here? What caused the shift from point A to point B? The author says, Moses didn't show them any miraculous sign or wonder in the interim. I understand if Moses showed them a big miracle. Oh, you're not sure if God could do this? Let me show you a big miracle. I get it. You do something impressive, a miracle. Maybe the Jews will say, oh, now we have a change of heart. But Moses didn't do that. All he did was to tell them how God was infuriated with them and had sworn not to bring them into the land. That's what happened. The Jews cry hysterically. God expresses himself to Moses. And it wasn't a pretty message. And Moses shares the message with the Jewish people. God basically says, I want to give you the promised land, a gift. And you say you don't want it. God is very mad. And God says, okay, you don't want to go. Request granted. You will not go. You don't want to go to the land of Israel, you'll stay here in the desert for the rest of your lives and you will die here. And you would think the Jews would right away breathe a sigh of relief. Thank you, God. You're just about to send us into such a difficult situation. Oh, we'll live here. Life is good here. We got mana. We've got stuff. That's not what happened. They hear that, and all of a sudden they have a change of heart. They hear that God's upset with them. They hear that God is going to take away the gift of this generation, being able to land of Israel. All of a sudden they say, no, let's actually go. The Alter says, I don't get it. Let's continue reading. The Alter Rebbe asks, but how could that help to persuade them if they didn't believe in God's power, heaven forbid, to conquer the 31 kings who controlled Canaan, if that were the true reason that they originally did not want to enter the land? Something doesn't add up over here. You don't want to go because even God can't conquer the land. God says, okay, we're not going to go. That should be the end of the story. End of negotiations. Now we're on the same page. Instead, the moment God tells them, okay, you don't want to go, we won't go, right away they say, no, actually, let's go. I'm just not getting what's happening over here. This is an interesting read of the story, right? So the Alter gives the answer. Rather, here's the answer, page 223, right? Rather, the truth is that Jewish people themselves are inherently people of faith. Believers, the children of believers, to quote the Talmud. Every Jew believes in God. You can't help it. Of course we believe in God. So then why is it sometimes we have doubts in faith? Says the Alter Rebbe, it is only that the Sitra Achra has been integrated into their personalities. Oh, that's the problem. The Jew believes, but God also puts into the body an animal soul with Sitra Achra. And then what happens? And with audacity, and with arrogance, and a senseless, irrational chutzpah, it inflates itself to shadow the holy light of their divine souls. So every Jew believes. Every Jew has faith in God. Perfect faith in God. But what happens? We also have an animal soul. And the animal soul sometimes asserts itself with an arrogance and with an irrational, senseless chutzpah. It doesn't even make any sense. And it tries confusing the Jew. And it eclipses the light of the godly soul. And all of a sudden the Jew is confused. I don't know if I believe in God anymore. And the Alter says it's senseless, it's irrational. Look what's happening here in the story. The people who just left Egypt are saying, oh, no. God can't give us the land of Israel. God can't give us the land of Canaan. The army there is too powerful. It's irrational. It's stupidity. How is this happening? The animal soul has an arrogance. And it's senseless. It's irrational. It's chutzpah. How do you break down the arrogance of the animal soul? Make it feel crushed. Crush that ego. Crush that arrogance. And that's exactly what happens here in this story. Says the Alter Rebbe, therefore then, everything immediately changed when God berated them, the Jewish people, in a furious and enraged tone. The moment that the Jews felt the heat, and all of a sudden their egos were crushed, and all of a sudden they felt humbled. All of a sudden what happens? So one second, the Alter is going to give us a few quotes from the verses. God says, how long must I put up with this wicked community? Your corpses will fall in this wilderness. I, God, have spoken. I will do this thing to all this wicked community. Oh, so this is all of a sudden the Jews are getting a little bit of humble pie over here, right? Then what happens, says the Alter Rebbe, and as soon as they heard these harsh words, their hearts were humbled and broken within them. As the verse continues, and the people mourned greatly. And what happens when the Jew feels broken? What happens when the Jew feels that humility? And then instantly, the Sitra Achra fell from its position of power, from its audacity and its arrogance. And when the animal soul, when the facade of the animal soul recedes, and all of a sudden then what could happen? Then the Jew emerges. What was left was the Jews themselves, people of faith. Why weren't the Jews believing? Because the animal soul literally hijacked them and eclipsed the light and the energy and the faith of the divine soul. The Jews experienced what this chapter of Tanya is telling us to do. Go through a little bit of an experience which crushes the ego. When you crush the ego, the animal soul, in a poof, it loses this arrogance. It loses the facade of confidence. And then what happens? Then the real you emerges. And the real you believes in God. So the Alter is saying the Jews didn't have to be convinced by Moses to believe in God. The Jews believed in God. But there was some type of extraneous force, like a virus, that's just, coating the Jew with this, unhealthy layer. But it's just it's only an outer layer. It's a shell. It's not the real Jew. But once we could break that facade, once we could break that layer, then we have the real Jew. And the real Jew believes. And the Alter concludes the chapter with such an inspiring final few words for us. Page 224. And here the Alter addresses us directly. The lesson for us. This is something from which every person can learn a lesson. We all must learn from this story. That what? Whenever doubts of faith fall into your head, right? We're all human. Sometimes we have bad days. We lose our faith. We lose our spiritual connection. It happens. All of a sudden we go through an experience of spiritual desensitization. We become spiritually numb. We become spiritually cold. It happens. Says the Alter Rebbe, you can be rest assured that they are only the words of the Sitra Achra, which tends to inflate its position over your divine soul. You are not confused. Your animal soul is confused. And your animal soul is hijacking you. Don't think you are confused. Don't think you have doubts. Don't think you have problems. No, you are healthy. You are a divine soul. You have faith. You're beautiful. You have power. You're there already. There's just this outer layer, this facade that's just coming and... The Alter says, but you yourself are a Jew. Of the people that are believers, the children of believers. You're a Jew. This line of Tanya is literally the secret sauce of Chabad. When a Jew told the Rebbe, oh, I don't believe in God, the Rebbe wouldn't argue with him. You know what the Rebbe would do? Inspire him to do a mitzvah. Let's let the divine soul come out. Let's get the divine soul, flowing. Let's get those good juices flowing. When a Jew says, I don't believe in God, don't believe him. It's not true. It's a lie. Now, it doesn't mean the Jew's lying. It could be he himself is fooled by this delusion. The Jew believes. The Jew is healthy. Every Jew is there. There's no such thing as a bad Jew. There's no such thing as a Jew who believes more, and there's no such thing as a Jew who believes less. We all believe. We are all the believers, the children of believers. Every single Jew is connected with God. But the animal soul sometimes gets in the way. All you got to do is peer a little bit deeper and try to allow the godly soul to express itself. You don't need to sit there and convince the Jew and have theological arguments. The Jew is healthy. And the Alter is telling you that if you ever suffer from a phase of life when you have doubts of faith and you're struggling spiritually, know that this is not the real you. Have confidence in yourself. And try to do things that will allow your divine soul to emerge once again. And you will see, you never had the problem to begin with. The health was always there. And the Alter concludes with a final point. What is more, even the Sitra Achra itself has no doubts whatsoever about faith in God. Even the animal soul believes in God. It's just that it has been authorized to confuse a person with lies and deception. This is such an amazing idea. The animal soul and the power of Sitra Achra is trying to convince you not to believe in God. The Alter says, even the Sitra Achra believes in God. It's only that God sends the animal soul to act as like a secret agent, to pose itself as an enemy against your divine soul. But it's really not true. It's just a deception. Why? Says the Alter Rebbe, the reason why God does that, to send the animal soul to confuse the person, is like this: in order to increase the person's reward. Like the parable written in the Holy Zohar of the prostitute who was authorized by the king to make advances to his son. This parable came up before in Tanya, either once or twice, maybe twice. For sure once. The parable is like this, briefly. There's a king who has a crown prince The crown prince will eventually become the next king. But the king, the father of the crown prince, wants to help develop and bring out the strength within his son, the future king. He wants to help train the son deal with difficult situations. He wants to help train the son to overcome challenges and to get in touch with his own strength within himself. So the king does something very interesting. He hires one of his loyal subjects who happens to be a prostitute. All right. She's not in the best line of work. Okay. The king sends her to try to seduce the crown prince. Now, if she would be successful, it would be a horrible embarrassment to the king, to the crown prince. So there's high risk over here. But the king wants to do it because he wants his son to have a real challenge and to win the challenge and to unlock the greatness and the strength that he knows his son has, but he wants to bring it out. He wants to help his son become more mature and to become stronger. The Zohar uses that as a parable for what our animal soul is, for what our Yetzer Hara is. You could think, why would God give me, if God wants me to be a good Jew, why is God giving me an animal soul? Why does God make it hard for me to be a good Jew? And this is one of the mysteries. The animal soul is not a force which is against God. The animal soul is a force of God. Some forces of God look godly. Some forces of God are undercover agents. And they don't look godly. And they look like a threat to your godliness. But it's all to help you as a Jew be successful. And dear friends, on that very positive and optimistic note, we conclude chapter 29, a very heavy chapter. And the idea is, for spiritual health, we need to be in a position, we cannot allow our animal soul and the arrogance of our animal soul to become so dominant in our lives. That becomes very spiritually unhealthy. That's detrimental to spirituality. So we need to have that healthy balance. And that's going to become a theme in the next few chapters. To raise the dominance of our spirituality, of our divinity, of our divine soul, and not allow our animal soul to have such dominance within our lives. So we still have a lot to learn. Next week, chapter 30, a beautiful chapter, really one of my favorite chapters, chapter 30. And what can I tell you, dear friends? This was wonderful. So I want to wish you all a wonderful evening. And so glad we're back on with Tanya. And sei gesund. We'll see you all soon.